So the first library that I had to use, is of course the original Rogers Memorial Library building, which most everyone is familiar with on Job's Lane in Southampton. And of course that library was, to me, just the most beautiful library. As a kid, I grew up in Southampton Village and really was very, very sad when they moved, because I just thought it was just such a neat building. The building was built in 1895, opened to the public in 1896, and the architect was R.H. Robertson, who was actually a very well-known architect, and he was known for designing many residential and commercial and institutional buildings in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including a building called the Park Row Building, located at 15 Park Row in New York City, which at the time was actually the world's largest, tallest office building. And it's actually still standing today and is mostly apartments. And I looked it up, there are some vacancies. So if you're looking for a place, they're really neat. So I really thought that was interesting because he was such a famous architect. And I thought it was really special that he considered designing for a small town library like ours. So 20 years after the original library opened, another famed architect, who many know from the area, Grosvenor Atterbury, he did an addition to the library that was completed in 1915. And after quickly outgrowing the original library, obviously we all know the current library on Cooper's Farm Road is right here. Now, I was not very happy when they were building this library, having grown up here, as I mentioned. It's just always upsetting when things are built. And now when I look at it, I actually spent time looking at it after doing this program, and it really is a beautiful building. And on the right, it's a feature that I also never noticed, 16 years of running up and down those stairs. But the stairway, the marble stairway, if you look up when you come the next time, it's really a very neat feature. So I think that library is actually really, really very beautiful. Now we're going to go to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. The Library of Congress is actually the largest library in the world, and it's housed in 3 buildings on Capitol Hill. The most famous structure is the one that you see in the picture, and that's the Thomas Jefferson Building. And it opened in 1897, and it houses the iconic main reading room, which is the library's principal reference and book service point. You can see here in that image. This library contains 170 million items, including 39 million books, and it fulfills several functions. It serves as for the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it's the home of the US Copyright Office. And it's also, actually, it really is a public library. And here are a couple more images just to get an idea of how beautiful it is. That is the lobby and the Great Hall. I don't know if any of you have been to the Library of Congress. I have not. But it really is stunning. The ceiling and the columns, and on the bottom you can see some of the people just looking up, awestruck at how beautiful it is. So we're going to stay in Washington, D.C. for a moment and head over to the Folger Shakespeare Library, which is located about a block from the US Capitol. This National Library was established in 1932, and it houses the world's largest Shakespeare collection and materials related to his works from the 16th century to the present day. And I thought that was very interesting that this library is in the United States rather than the UK. Along the front of the building, and you can kind of see if you look at the bottom image of the building, there are, and there's a better image of it, on the left you can see at the very bottom, there's 9 bas-reliefs, each featuring a scene from a different Shakespeare play. And here I just picked one of them to show you. That's a close-up of the Hamlet bas-relief. The other bas-reliefs that are on the building are from Henry IV, Part 1, Richard III, King Lear, Julius Caesar, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, Romeo and Juliet, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. So that might be fun to sort of walk around and see if you can tell what scene it's actually from. Here are two images just from different angles of the reading room in that library. And you can see the beautiful chandelier and the woodwork, the fireplace on the left, and some of the Shakespeare books that are on display. The library also contains this gorgeous Elizabethan theater where productions of Shakespeare's plays are actually performed for the public. This library did close in 2020, not because of COVID, but it closed for a scheduled multi-year renovation project that will expand some of its services to the public and some of its public spaces. And they're still, though, as many libraries are doing, they're still offering some online programming and also some online services. So that will be exciting to visit there when it's done and see what they have done to it, what it looks like. The next library we're going to go to is the Boston Public Library. And I mentioned this in the beginning as one of the earliest libraries actually in the United States, built in 1848. It actually is comprised of two buildings. And in 1986, the National Park Service designated this building, the McKim Building, a National Historic Landmark, citing it as the first outstanding example of Renaissance Beaux-Arts classicism in America. I don't know a lot about architect, but that's for those of you who might. Although it's not a museum, the library is crammed with paintings, tapestries, architectural details, and sculpture. There's actually a lot of sculpture outside and around the building. I didn't put pictures of that, but there are really neat statues. Plus, it has a fabulous third floor gallery, which is filled with John Singer Sargent murals. And if you look in the very top, right above the windows, right above those three arched windows, you can see that sign that says "Free to All." I don't know, you might have to lean in close to see it. This is the entrance hall and staircase of the Boston Public Library. The marble was quarried in France and is embedded with fossil shells. The two lions are carved from a single block of marble, and they actually memorialize two volunteer Massachusetts infantries from the Civil War. This is another angle of that same stairway. And here you can get a glimpse of the panels. You can see they go all around, but those are just four of them that you can see. And those panels were painted by a French painter named Pierre Puvis de Chavannes, who was considered one of the greatest muralists of the 19th century. And these are his only mural works that are outside of Paris. And they were painted on Belgian linen and shipped to Boston. And it's said that he actually never, ever saw them installed. This is the iconic Boston Public Library Bates Reading Room. It's located on the second floor of the McKim Building. It has a 50-foot high ceiling and Italian marble floors. And it just looks like the perfect place to stay all day and read. This next library is Seattle. We kind of took a trip far west. The Seattle Public Central Library in Seattle, Washington. This is a very ultra-modern design, unorthodox, and it looks very different from what people think of when they think of libraries, stuffy old buildings, very, very different. It opened in 2004, and Time magazine chose it as one of the year's top architectural designs. The American Institute of Architects ranked it as one of America's top 150 architectural wonders. It was designed by a Dutch architect along with a Seattle architectural firm. The building has 11 floors and it's just under 363,000 feet, and it has an auditorium with seating for 275. In the left-hand corner of the picture, you can see a portion of the auditorium where you see the stairs going down. Those are rows of chairs. These are just some buildings of pictures from the inside. The maple floorboards on level 1, this I just thought was so neat. I don't know if anyone's been to this library, but the maple floorboards have 556 lines of raised text in 11 languages featured in the library's collections. These words that are on the floor spell out backward the first sentences from books that are written in those 11 languages that are featured in the library. And here are just a few more images from the inside. They have an inside garden. I actually find this room a little dizzying. This is another feature of that library that is a unique feature. It's known as a book's spiral, which is a gently sloping spiral walkway that goes all the way through without using stairs, escalator, or elevator. And this is where the bulk of the nonfiction items are organized, and they're organized according to the Dewey Decimal System. And the numbers on the floor guide your way. So the right-hand picture is just, it shows you what it looks like on the floor. So those are the 8 10s. And then on the left is sort of a diagram of what it looks like. The areas in green on the left are the areas of the book spiral. It actually goes from level 6 to level 9. And of course, I had to add the library that we're all familiar with, which is the New York Public Library, the main branch. And the library that we're most familiar with, as I mentioned, is the main branch. It now actually consists of 92 locations and 4 research centers system-wide. I did not know that. It is among the top 5 largest libraries in the world, and it's the second library in the United States after the Library of Congress. So I thought that was kind of special that 2 of the largest libraries in the world are in the United States. The building opened in 1911 after taking 9 years to construct, and it contains about 4 acres of marble. It began as a gift of $400,000 from John Jacob Astor, who was the wealthiest American at the time, who wanted to create a reference library that was open to the public. The lions that you see at the entrance have nicknames that have changed over the years, but currently they are unofficially named Patience on the left and Fortitude on the right. At the top of the building, there are allegorical sculptures which stand in for fields represented by the library collections. So you can see those at the top left. And those collections and those figures are history, romance, poetry, religion, drama, and philosophy. One of the most familiar parts of the library is what you see here, and that's the main reading room, the Rose Reading Room, which is about the size of a football field. And here's another image just showing another angle. And here you can see a little bit of a glimpse of the mural on the ceiling of those billowy clouds. I have been here, which I think most people have. The whole building is raised on a terrace, which you don't realize when you're there, but from this older image, you can see where you see the people walking, and you can see how the entire library is actually raised up on a terrace. And the building spans 2 full blocks along 5th Avenue. Also interesting about this library is that there are 125 miles of shelving underground, much of it beneath Bryant Park. And in this image, you can get an idea of what that looks like. So many of the periodicals and books are stored underground. So you'll think of that the next time you use the public bathroom there, or if you go skating, that people are probably working underneath you. The next library we're going to look at is the Los Angeles Central Library in Los Angeles, California. And it is also a major architectural landmark and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It was originally built in the 1920s and is designed by the New York architect Bertram Goodhue and was an early form of Art Deco. An addition was added in 1993. At central points along the tower, there are symbols that highlight light and knowledge. There are also symbolic representations of great thinkers and writers who are presented in pairs. And here on this side, you can see Homer and Milton just below the base of that tower. There is also a rotunda ceiling with a bronze chandelier, zodiac chandelier, and there are 8 floors with seating for more than 1,400 people and 255 public access spaces. In April of 1986, a massive fire burned at the library for 7 hours, which resulted in the library being closed for 7 years. It damaged or destroyed more than 1 million books and artifacts. It's just awful. So the fire was never solved, but they do suspect arson. And that story was actually recently the subject of a novel that came out by author Susan Orlean called The Library Book. And the book really doesn't try to solve the crime, but explores the story about what happened and also highlights how crucial the roles of libraries are today. I've actually had this book on my to-read list for about a year and have not gotten to it yet. I don't know if anyone else has been able to read it. Now we're going to take a look at the George Peabody Library in Baltimore, Maryland. This library is described and has the designation as the most beautiful library in the world. It's often referred to as Baltimore's Cathedral of Books, and it was a gift from Massachusetts philanthropist George Peabody, who dedicated the library to the people of Baltimore for their kindness and hospitality. The building opened in 1878, and there are massive skylights, which you can see at the top, which oversee 5 rows of ornate balconies that descend to an elegant marble floor. If you're not close enough, just stick your face by the screen and just take a look at that library if you haven't seen it. It is so beautiful. I have not been there, but this is probably the first one I will try to visit once everything opens up. It has a huge atrium in the center with each level of the library overlooking that central space. You can see that from the image. And the main room has 5 tiers of cast iron balconies. The skylight is 61 feet above the marble floor, and it contains over 300,000 volumes of books. And that main room is also a very, very popular room for private events and for weddings. Here's another image from a different angle. Now we're going to the Kansas City Public Library in Missouri. And the original building once was a First National Bank, and you can sort of see that if you look closely at the very top of the building, it still says First National Bank. And the main lobby retained some of those parts of that bank, and so when they renovated, they included the original chandeliers and the marble floors. They also converted the bank vault into a small 28-seat theater. I thought this was so neat. and they screen films there on Saturday afternoons. The room is also available to rent for private meetings. So there's the bank vault, and I think if you look, you can see just the back row of seats, but it's just a little small theater with 28 seats. But the most unique feature of this building is not that it was a bank. It is the car garage, the parking garage. The parking garage is covered in signboard mylar, and it appears to be a row of books lined up on a shelf, except in this case, the books are 25 feet high and 9 feet wide. The garage behind the books was constructed in 2006 in response to a need for additional downtown parking, and the community input was requested on ways to beautify the new structure, and this is where the idea evolved to do this. Community members and patrons also were asked to vote on the titles to be displayed, and the ones chosen reflect a wide range of famous literature. There are 22 volumes which list 42 titles. Some of the popular titles are The Lord of the Rings. I think you can see that in that image. Catch-22, Goodnight Moon, Harold and the Purple Crayon. That was one of my favorites when I was little. Winnie the Pooh, Green Eggs and Ham, Little House on the Prairie, Their Eyes Were Watching God, and To Kill a Mockingbird. What's also neat is the stairs were designed as books. You can see that there. The library also has a rooftop terrace where they hold monthly movie nights throughout the summer. So now we're going to take a look at some libraries that are not the standard. The first library that we're going to look at is the Biblio Borough in Colombia. It was founded by primary school teacher Luis Soriano, and you see him there. And he was worried that some of his students didn't do their homework because of not having books at home. So he came up with this idea of the library to deliver books to them. The books are kept in the pouches of two donkeys named Alpha and Beta. The library started with just 70,000 books, but it has now grown to more than 5,000. And here you can see a picture of some children picking their selections. Luis actually has encountered bandits along his route. In one of the instances, the bandits actually took one of his books. And also in one little problem, an accident that he had in 2012 with one of the Biblio burrows, it resulted in his leg being amputated, his left leg, but he still continues dedicated to the cause. And I read that his family, his wife and children also join in helping now with some of the work. And a children's book was actually written about Luis and his Biblio Borough in 2010 called Biblio Borough, A True Story from Colombia. And it was written by Jeanette Winter, and I actually checked, and we do have the book in our library, but what a nice story for children. Sticking with animal theme, I just have one image here. This is another library from Mongolia, the Mongolian Children's Mobile Library. And this camel carries books to the nomadic herding communities and remote areas of the Gobi Desert. The founder, Jambin Dashdandog, has written more than 70 children's books himself, so he was very interested in making sure children were able to read. And I don't know, in that image, it looks like the camel is super proud to be carrying those books. This is another library created by Sarah Peters, the Floating Library, Cedar Lake, Minneapolis. And this library does have books that you actually do check out. The structure, which is more like a raft, is stocked with about 80 titles on each trip that are primarily handmade artist books. They're usually not bestsellers that we're familiar with. And it was the creation of the artist Sarah Peters who wanted to find a way to spend more time on the water. And in this next image, you can see some of her patrons. The only thing you do need to have a canoe, a kayak, or a paddleboard to get to this library. Next, we're going to go to a library that isn't that exciting to look at. It's called the Haskell Free Library and Opera House. And actually, Pat, my coworker, is the one who found this library for me. And it's located, if you look on the right, it's located in Derbyline, Vermont, and Stansted, Quebec, Canada. So what's unique about this library is that its borderline runs right through the library floor. It was built deliberately in 1904 as a symbol of cross-cultural cooperation. So the library is literally divided between two countries. And in that image, you can see that row of pots with the flowers and the stones. That is actually the borderline. And here's another entrance. The official image. The official entrance is on the US side of the building. However, most of the books are on the Canadian side. The Opera House that's on the second floor of the building has a similar split, with most of the seats being in the US, but the stage is in Canada. So you don't need passports to pass from country to country within the library. You can see on the left, the image on the right, that black line is the dividing line between the countries on the floor. But visitors are expected to return to their side when they leave the library, and it is strictly enforced at the risk of detention or fines if you try to go off to the wrong country. Currently, the library is closed, though, due to COVID-19 border regulations. Because of the travel restrictions, it wasn't really possible to have people mingle between countries, so they did have to close the library. It still is closed right now. But prior to that, it had actually begun to play an unlikely role as a reunion site for people who were separated by immigration policies. They could get here and be able to meet for a little bit while they were in the library. So this might be a neat place to put on your list of places to visit once everything opens. Here we have the Ipos library boat in Norway, and you can see it docked there on the left. It was established as a way to reach communities on a number of islands that are unreachable except by boat. The first library boat in Norway was commissioned by librarians in 1959, and in just a few months, it visited over 150 towns, lending over 7,000 books. So given the popularity, the Norwegian government commissioned a custom-built ship in 1963, the Ipos, which you can see in the picture on top at dock. And it carries 2 or 3 librarians at a time, 6,000 books at a time, in addition to the captain and the crew. And in the image on the bottom, you can see, just like we do at our library, they actually were hosting a children's program. So that was taking place on the boat. Unfortunately, in 2020, politicians of a newly created regional government voted to discontinue the service. So we hope that someday that will be active again. Here we see probably the most unusual library of all, and it is termed the weapon of mass instruction. It's located in Argentina. And there you see the creator on the left, the eccentric Argentinian artist Raul Limassoff. He converted a 1979 Ford Falcon into this tank-like vehicle. It holds about 900 books inside and out, and he delivers these across Argentina throughout urban centers and rural communities. And the books are free. The only requirement is that he'll give it to you if you promise to read it. He also collects books as he goes along, so his library is always pretty fully stocked. In one interview, he was quoted as saying, "It's a contribution to peace through literature." And here's another image of someone picking out a book. Now, some of the libraries that I just thought were just really interesting to look at. The first one is the Stuttgart City Library in Stuttgart, Germany. I'm not sure how I feel about the building on the outside, but it opened in 2011. It's super modern, multi-storied, as you can see there. And the inside, though, I thought was so neat. It's a little cold, but I just love the idea of how you can see all of the books. Wide open staircases, everything is white, and the books are the only thing that really add color to the room, except for maybe the seating chairs. The building has had mixed reviews, but it definitely is eye-catching. And that's another one you might want to lean close to take a look at. Now, this is I have not been here, but this was my favorite library. This is the Central Public Library in Vancouver, Canada. And I like it because it looks like the Colosseum in Rome, and I love Rome. So that means I like this library a lot. This library opened in 1995, and the library is 9 stories high. The entire library actually occupies an entire city block of downtown Vancouver because it includes the federal office tower, which you can see in the background. The tall building next to it is attached to it. And that building is 21 stories. The exterior of the building is covered in granite. And the library is actually rectangular, but it's surrounded by this freestanding elliptical colonnaded wall. And that's what you see here that gives it that Colosseum appearance. And if I go to this image, if you look on the left, that's a picture of the inside. So you can sort of see the square or rectangle, I should say, glass wall, and how the rest of the building has just that colonnaded wall around it. So there's lots of seating space and reading areas. And on the top, they also have a rooftop terrace. This building was the largest capital project ever undertaken by the city of Vancouver. And the last library I'm going to show, this is very quick, the last library is the Trinity College Library in Dublin, Ireland. This is the largest library in Ireland, and it also serves as the country's copyright library. It was built between 1712 and 1732, and its claim to fame is that it's the home of the famous Book of Kells, which is the illuminated manuscript created by Celtic monks around the year 800. And that's actually kept in this room that you see here, the long room. This also is the most famous room in the library. It holds 200,000 of the library's oldest books. The room is also, that's the top level. At the bottom level, the room is filled with these 40 marble busts, all male, of great philosophers and writers, and also men connected with Trinity College. But in 2020, it was commissioned that 4 female bust sculptures be added. And this was the first time in over a century that new sculptures were commissioned, and it will be the first time that females will also, busts will also line these walls. And they do have the 4 picked out, and I neglected to write the names down, but they do have the 4 picked out. And that is it. So I'm wondering if anyone has been to any of these libraries. Like I said, I have not been and would really like to go. Has anyone been to any of these libraries? No? Does anyone ever go to libraries when they travel?
Yes.
Yeah, I do too. But I'm very sad that I haven't gone to any of these.
Well, I made some notes so that when things open up again, I'll know where I can go. Ooh, what was that noise?
Do you know what I can do is I can email a list of the libraries.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. I can send, if everyone wants, I could send it out to everyone that was on the list. That's not a problem.
Do you have any idea why they chose to put the first sentences of those books in the Seattle Public Library into the floor backward?
As to why. I just think that looks so neat though. And why they wrote it backward, I don't know. She is an artist, and I don't know if I put her name. I think it was Anne Hamilton. So that may have just been her creative side.
Hmm.
I never saw a reason for it, but I just think it looks really, really neat. That library looks like a lot of fun. So are there any libraries that you wished I had added? I will tell you, I wish I had added every single library that I saw.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
If you look up the library in Budapest, Hungary, it's considered one of the most beautiful in the world. It's very ornate, somewhat Gothic. I haven't been there. I've been to Budapest, but I didn't know about the library at the time. And you'll be amazed when you see it.
Oh,
Also, unfortunately, I was a tiny bit late in joining. You were on the Boston Public Library when I joined. Were there any that preceded that?
I started with, yes, just the ones that are mostly familiar to us. The Library of Congress, obviously, the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington. And let's see, what else did I do? Have them out of order. I think those may have been the only two that you missed.
Okay, great. And this was so interesting. And I love the one on a boat in Norway. That's amazing. I hope they bring it back.
To find that they put the kibosh on that, because they said that every time it was just filled up with people. So I'm not really sure. That sounds like some sort of governmental thing going on there.
Cost-cutting measure, I guess. Well, hopefully they won't sell the boat and someone will bring it back.
Really sad.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for joining. And I have to say, if you just take a look, maybe I'll send to some of the books where I got some of the information. I just was surprised. It just really proves how important libraries are, because the amount of money that has been put into building and upkeeping and renovating. A lot of these libraries have had renovations in fairly recent years, including, of course, the New York Public Library had that reading room renovated. You know, that terrible fire in the Los Angeles Library, they had to
What year was that? Do you recall?
It was 1986.
Wow.
And they were finished rebuilding. They reopened in 1993, I think.
Wow. Did much of the library, was much of it hurt?
I'm sorry?
Was much of the Los Angeles library hurt or burned?
Oh yeah, if you look at the images, it was really, really bad. Or as they said, it took them, the fire, burned for 7 hours. So
It wasn't an intentional fire, I hope.
they think it was.
Oh no.
They never solved, it's an unsolved mystery.
Oh,
But they do know, they are pretty sure that it was arson. And I think they did have a lead, but up to this point, it's still considered unsolved.
Right. Well, thank you again. Most enlightening.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yvette, do you know whether they still have the library on horseback in the Appalachian Mountains?
That I didn't see. That's really neat. Like where I have to say, picking was like, it was impossible.
Oh, I'll bet.
It was just really impossible. But even if you want to go on the computer and just have fun one day when you have nothing better to do with your time, it is amazing how many libraries. And I thought also the ones where they really reach out to the people that don't have access is sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Something just occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
There are Baroque libraries. There is one in Vienna. There's one at Melk Abbey, just outside of Vienna. And there's a very famous one in Prague. It's at a monastery called the Strahov, Strahov monastery. They're exquisite. I've been to all of them. The one in Prague, it's in the Castle district. It overlooks the city. And
I actually
you see it,
have on my
have you,
list.
I'm sorry?
I actually have that on my list. It's the
It's
Straw
so
Monastery
beautiful.
Library. There, I have
It's
a whole list of European ones that I did not get to talk about because, as I said, it was impossible to really.
right, of course, of course. Well,
Those-
I just wanted to say the one at Strahov, if you're going just to see it as we did, you can't walk in. You see it from a hallway, and there are 2 rooms. But you can get an advance ticket, and a guide, I believe, brings you in. We did see people, they allow very few at a time, but if you did want to enter it, you have to know in advance. But
I have been to
they're
Prague and I did
just
not go there.
extraordinary. Yeah, Prague is a wonder as well, the city of Prague. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.